My name is Ethan. Last year, I moved into an old, cheap apartment in a forgotten part of the city. For the first time in a long time, I felt this strange sense of peace. I'd spent years chasing dreams, bouncing between rented rooms, and battling loneliness. I thought, finally, I'd found a place to call my own. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. It was ancient, but clean. The building's exterior walls bore the scars of time, as if the very bricks whispered stories from the past. The landlord, a gaunt man with shifty eyes, told me, "This building dates back to the early 1900s, but don't worry, it's solid." I smiled and agreed, but a faint, cold tug at the back of my mind told me something was off. The first night was unnervingly silent. The only sound was the occasional distant bark of a dog. But inside, behind the walls, I could almost feel something breathing. I told myself it was just an old building, that strange sounds were normal. I made my bed, switched off the light, and was just drifting off when a distinct thump, thump, thump echoed through the room. My eyes snapped open. The sound wasn't coming from the door or the window. It felt like it was coming from inside the wall. I lay frozen. Then, in a trembling whisper, I asked, "Who's there?" Only silence answered. I turned over and closed my eyes, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. I didn't get any real sleep until dawn. The next day, I went downstairs for some milk and ran into an elderly woman from the apartment across the hall. Everyone called her Old Lady Maeve. She had this stern, almost sorrowful look. I tried to be friendly, asking Maeve, "How long have you lived here?" She replied in a chillingly flat voice, "A very long time, dear. ... This building has seen everything." I tried to laugh it off. "Everything? What do you mean?" Her eyes took on this unsettling, distant quality. She looked down and said slowly, "The apartment you're in. A young man lived there before you." A cold dread started seeping into my bones. "What happened to him?" I pressed. She immediately changed the subject. "Nothing, dear. Let it be. Some old stories are best left untold." I fell silent, but her words planted a seed of ice in my heart. That night, around 1 a.m., I was working on my laptop when I heard it again. Thump, thump. But this time, it was accompanied by the faint sound of breathing. I switched off the light and strained my ears. The breaths were heavy, labored, like someone was trapped inside the wall. My throat tightened. I couldn't make a sound. Slowly, I got out of bed, approached the wall, and placed my palm against it. The surface was cold, but inside, I felt a faint, unsettling warmth. I snatched my hand back, my legs suddenly feeling weak. I tried to convince myself it was just the pipes, or my imagination running wild. But the next morning, when I examined the wall closely, I saw a faint seam beneath the paint. It looked exactly like someone had sealed a door shut and painted over it. My curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of dread, took over. I scraped at the seam with my fingernail, and a small chip of paint flaked off, revealing a sliver of wood underneath. I grabbed a small screwdriver and slowly began to chip away at the plaster. After about 20 minutes of this unsettling work, a small metal handle became visible. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled. A small door opened in the wall just wide enough for a person to crouch and squeeze through. Inside was absolute darkness, the air stale and heavy. I turned on my phone's flashlight and pointed it into the space. It was a small room. The walls were damp, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. On the floor lay an old, mildewed mattress, and next to it, a camera. The lens was pointed directly at the wall behind my bed. My heart stopped. I picked up the camera. It was an old model, but surprisingly clean. I pressed the power button, and it turned on. It contained previous recordings. My finger shaking, I clicked play. A video began. It was footage of someone sleeping in my bed, and that person was me. I slammed the camera shut, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I quickly shut the hidden door, but a moment later, I distinctly heard a faint, chilling giggle coming from inside. The next day, I confronted the landlord. I told him everything. He looked startled, then scoffed. "That's impossible. There's nothing behind that wall. The apartment is complete." "I saw it myself," I insisted, my voice tight with fear. He promised to come by that evening. Around 9 o'clock, he arrived. I showed him the spot, but when I placed my hand on the wall, the door was gone. Where the handle had been, there was now only smooth, undisturbed paint. The landlord looked confused. Then his expression hardened. "Son, you're imagining things. This is an old building. Sometimes there are noises, but there's no hidden room. Why don't you believe me?" I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. He just stayed silent. As he left, he said, "If anything feels strange, lock your door at night and say your prayers." On the third night, I took a sleeping pill and tried to force myself to sleep. It was raining outside, each drop hitting the window like a drum in some terrifying symphony. Around 2 a.m., I suddenly heard footsteps, first in the kitchen, then in the living room. I immediately turned on my phone's flashlight. Nothing. Then, a creak-creak sound came from under my bed. I bent down to look. No one was there. But when I straightened up, a shape had formed on the opposite wall from the dampness of face. Hazy and indistinct, yet undeniably human, I stood frozen. The face seemed to be forming slowly. First the eyes, then the lips, and the lips moved ever so slightly. "Help me." I stumbled backward, my breath caught in my throat. The next moment, the face vanished. I collapsed onto the floor, completely numb with terror. When I woke up, I was still on the floor, my whole body cold, as if I had a fever. I looked at the wall. The face was gone, but a new line had appeared, exactly in the same spot where the hidden door had been. I felt a chilling certainty that it had returned. With trembling hands, I moved closer. And as soon as I touched the wall, something thumped from inside. I pulled back, slamming my own door shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Darkness swam before my eyes. That night, I tried with all my might to convince myself that what I'd seen was just a dream, maybe a hallucination, brought on by pure exhaustion. But my heart, it just wouldn't buy it. It was pounding a rhythm of pure, unadulterated fear against my ribs. Then, around 2:30 in the morning, the vibration of my phone on the nightstand jolted me awake. I squinted at the screen. A message from an unknown number. It was just one line, 6 simple words that sent a jolt of ice-cold terror straight through my soul. "Why did you close the door?" My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely hold the phone. I deleted the message, swiped it away, as if that could erase the memory. But the fear was already inside me, a venom spreading through my veins. Sleep was now an impossible luxury. There was no way I was closing my eyes again tonight. I swung my legs out of bed, the floorboards cold beneath my feet. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it down in one go, trying to soothe the frantic fluttering in my chest. To distract myself, I decided to turn on the TV. just some noise, something normal, to fill the suffocating silence. But the moment the screen flickered to life, it immediately lost its signal. White, angry, static lines danced across the screen, a chaotic, hissing mess, and then a hazy image began to form. It was my room. It was the exact scene as it was right now: the TV, the sofa I was sitting on, the lamp in the corner. And on that screen, I saw myself, sitting right there, from that exact angle, my back to the wall, my breath hitched in my throat. This was impossible. Then, on the screen, a shadow moved behind the image of me. A dark, formless shape. I whipped my head around, my heart leaping into my throat. There was nothing. The room was empty. And in that same instant, the TV clicked off, plunging the room back into darkness and silence. My eyes were drawn back to the wall where the door had been, where that faint line had appeared last night. The paint was now slightly peeled away, like a tiny, puckered scar. My feet seemed to move on their own, carrying me towards it. I reached out a trembling hand and placed my palm flat against the plaster, and I felt it, a faint vibration, a low hum, as if the wall itself were alive, as if it were breathing. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and morbid curiosity. I started to scratch away the paint along the edge of that faint line, my nails digging into the plaster. Within moments, the outline of the small door reappeared, stark and undeniable against the wall. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I turned on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, unsteady in my shaking hand. I reached for the edge of the door, and as it swung open, a gust of cold, musty air rushed out to meet me. It felt ancient, like opening a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. Inside was the same scene I remembered. The old, stained mattress thrown in the corner, the strange, dark smudges on the walls. And there, in the corner, that same old camera, its lens like a single, dead eye staring back at me. I took a hesitant step inside. The floor was damp under my shoes, and a strange, decaying odor filled the air, thick and cloying. On the far wall, I saw something new. A faint inscription had been etched into the plaster, as if carved with a fingernail. It read, "This room breathes." An involuntary whisper escaped my lips. What does that mean? And as the words left my mouth, a sound answered from the darkness, a distinct, labored breath right behind me. I spun around frantically, my flashlight beam cutting a wild arc through the room. There was no one there. Only the open door, slightly ajar, leading back to the safety of my apartment. I swept the light around again, and this time I saw the walls were covered in strange, desperate marks. Deep scratches, claw marks, as if someone had been trapped in here, trying to claw their way out. Then my flashlight beam landed on something in the corner, and my blood ran cold. It was a face, pale, with sunken, lifeless eyes, half protruding from the wall itself. It looked like someone was trapped inside the plaster, struggling to break free. I tried to scream, but the sound was strangled in my throat, a choked, silent gasp. And then the face began to move. Its eyes blinked, and slowly, horrifically, it receded back into the wall, disappearing as if it had never been there. Panic seized me. I scrambled backwards, desperate to escape, but the door slammed shut with a deafening boom. I was plunged into absolute darkness. I threw myself against the door, pounding on it with all my strength, screaming, "Let me out! Is anyone there? Let me out!" But outside, there was only a profound, suffocating silence. My cries were swallowed by the room. Then, in the oppressive darkness, a faint red light began to glow on the floor in front of me. Lines began to emerge, as if written in fresh blood. They spelled out a message. "You saw me. Now you will never leave." My knees buckled. All strength left my body. I sank to the floor, my phone's light flickering one last time before it died completely. Then, darkness, complete and total. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. The room was perfectly normal. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the wall. It was sealed, smooth. The door was gone. For a moment, a wave of relief washed over me. Maybe it really had all been a nightmare, a horrible, vivid, terrifying dream. But then, as I went to the restroom to splash water on my face, I saw them, angry red scratches running down my arm. The exact same pattern as the marks I'd seen on the wall inside that hidden room. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. I spent the day in a haze of sleep deprivation and mental turmoil, the line between reality and nightmare blurring with every passing hour. That evening, I knew I had to talk to someone. I went downstairs and knocked on old Lady Maeve's door again. When she opened it, I didn't waste any time. "Maeve," I said, my voice strained. "Do you know who lived in my apartment before me?" Maeve was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed and spoke slowly. "Dear, a young man lived there. His name was Julian. A bit strange, people said. They said he would talk to the walls at night." "What happened to him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maeve took a long, shaky breath. "One day he just vanished. The police came. They broke the lock. Everything was still there. His clothes, his wallet, but he was gone." "And did anyone ever see a hidden room?" I pressed, my heart pounding, desperate for confirmation. Maeve flinched. True fear entered her eyes. "What hidden room?" "There's no hidden room here, dear. Don't be silly. I saw it myself," I insisted, my voice rising with desperation. "I was in it." Maeve's face turned ashen. She took a step back, her hand fluttering to her chest. She spoke in a voice that was barely audible. "The night Julian disappeared, he said the same thing. He told the police that he had seen a door behind the wall. The ground beneath my feet felt like it had crumbled away. I was determined to uncover the truth. I couldn't live like this, haunted by what I'd seen." The next day, I went to the landlord's office. "I need to see the old records for this apartment," I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, looking uncomfortable, but my insistence must have worn him down. He finally pulled out a yellowed, dusty envelope from an old filing cabinet and placed it on the desk in front of me. Inside was the original building blueprint. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, and there it was. On the plan for my apartment, right behind the main wall of my living room, a blank space was clearly marked. An empty rectangle with no doors, no windows, no label. "What is this?" I asked, pointing a trembling finger at the blueprint. The landlord averted his gaze. I don't know," he mumbled. "Perhaps it was built as a storage room once, an error in the plans," but he didn't sound convinced. I knew he was lying, or at least hiding something. I snatched the blueprint, tucked it into my pocket, and walked out. A chilling, terrifying decision had solidified in my heart. Tonight, I was going back into that room, and I was going to find out what was truly in there. That night, at precisely 2 a.m., I was ready. I had my phone, a powerful flashlight, and a small knife I'd taken from the kitchen. I went to the wall, took a deep breath, and placed my hand on the spot where the door had been. I didn't even have to push. The door swung open by itself, a silent invitation into the darkness. Inside, there was absolute silence. I stepped in slowly, my senses on high alert. The air in the room was cold, but this time there was a new smell, like burning wood, faint but unmistakable. I noticed the mattress was gone. The corner of the room was empty, but then I heard it, the faint, rhythmic sound of someone breathing slowly. It seemed to be coming from the floor itself. I swept my flashlight beam across the room, and there, directly in front of me, sat a hunched figure. Its back was to me, its hair long and matted, its shoulders slumped in defeat. My voice was choked with fear as I spoke. "Who are you?" It didn't move, it just sat there, breathing. I took a shaky step closer, my knuckles white around the flashlight. "Listen," I asked, "who are you?" And then, very slowly, it began to turn. A figure emerged from the shadows. As it stepped into the dim light, Ethan's blood ran cold. The face staring back at him was his own, but lifeless, with blood streaming from its eyes. A hollow voice echoed in the tiny room. "I am not your reflection. You are my shadow." Before Ethan could react, the entity lunged at him, whispering, "Now you will never leave here." Then, just as suddenly, he was back in his bed. It felt like a nightmare, but as he rubbed his eyes, his fingertips came away stained with crimson. He rushed to the bathroom mirror. The reflection was him, yes, but its eyes were devoid of light. The mirror image smirked and said, "You are no longer you, Ethan." From that day on, his life became a living hell. The walls of his apartment seemed to breathe. He heard footsteps, whispers, and sometimes his own voice calling from the other side, repeating the same chilling phrase over and over. "Open the door. I am you." He stopped eating, sleeping, or answering calls. His world had shrunk to the four walls of his haunted apartment, and the room that now owned his every waking thought and sleeping nightmare. He knew, with a terrifying certainty, that to end this, he had to go back. One night, he stood before the wall. This time, he didn't need to search for the door. Its faint outline appeared on its own. He stepped through into the familiar darkness. The room had changed. The walls were covered in bloody handprints, and on the old mattress lay a figure. As Ethan drew closer, he saw with sickening horror that it was his own body, cold and lifeless. The door slammed shut again. This time, a tall, featureless shadow seeped from the wall. A deep voice rumbled, "I am the breath of this room. Whoever sees me, I enter them. Now you will take my place." The shadow surged forward, and as it entered him, the screams of past victims, including a man named Julian, flooded his mind. Then, only darkness. Sometime later, Ethan awoke. The room was clean, the wall was smooth. A knock came at the door. It was a young couple, the new tenants. The landlord said, "You're leaving now," the man said cheerfully. Ethan smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, I'm just about to go." As he handed them the key, the girl asked, "How's the room? No strange noises, right?" He paused, then said softly, "No, just sometimes the wall breathes." He left without looking back, but he knew what was forming on the wall, inside a hazy, damp face that looked exactly like his. Months later, the apartment was sealed by the police after the new couple vanished, leaving only a single sentence written in blood: "I'm leaving. Now they will stay." To this day, the residents of the building avoid that corner of the building. But sometimes, late at night, they say you can still hear a faint knocking coming from behind the sealed door. 3 knocks, and if you listen very, very closely, you might just hear a whisper. Open the door, I am you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe and always check your walls.